People who were made to choose between your pet or your partner. How did your ex react when you chose your pet? This is my favorite story from when I worked in a shelter. A guy came in to surrender his cat, with the reason that his girlfriend didn't like her. He starts filling out the paperwork, but partway through he just stops and says, "Screw this. I'm just going to break up with her instead." He picks up the cat and walks out the door, presumably to leave his GF. I hope he stuck to it and he and his cat got a happy ending. She acted like she'd never even considered I'd choose the cat over her. I don't think that thought had ever entered her mind. Then she went into a big spiel about how I'm a loser. I'm missing out. There's only one of her. Etc. etc. Yeah. I knew all that when I put my foot down over her idiotic jealousy of the cat liking me more than her. The cat is now 16 and still with me. Happy in her senior years. There's been other women since her. Ones that treated me a lot better than she did. It was a total win for both the cat and myself. My ex asked me if she thought my dog liked me or her more and I said me. She got genuinely mad and told me I am supposed to just lie to her. Didn't last long. Not me but my sister chose our cat over her boyfriend of 4 months. He was furious when she dumped him and called her an idiot for picking a dirty fleabag over him. Cat was not a dirty fleabag. He just hated pets and wanted to try to control my sister. I was relieved when she dumped him. I never got good vibes from him. Not my story but my friend. His GF forced him to choose between her or dog, but that dog was remaining memento from his deceased mother, and of course he instantly dumped his GF. His GF went from face full with expectations to beet red full of shame and anger and smashed his house windows when she left his house. I found out my girlfriend was hitting my dog when I wasn't around. I left her and she was unable to admit that was the reason. I guess answering the question of, "What happened to you guys?" with, "Oh, he found out I was secretly hurting his dog," might make for awkward conversations. Veterinarians of Reddit. It is commonly depicted in movies and TV shows that vets are the ones to go to when criminals or vigilantes need an operation to remove bullets and such. How feasible is it for you to treat such patients in secret, and would you do it? My dad was a vet for 40 years. Large and small animals. He could absolutely remove bullets, clean wounds, do X-rays and stitch people up if he had to. He also told me that if a criminal was holding him hostage and forcing him to help, he would just give them a bunch of sedative, wait for them to pass out, then call the cops. Morally, I thought that was fine since it would be self-defense. The plan would only work if there was only one of them though. My dad was a vet. Our first aid kits are still stocked with suture materials. He removed my stitches more than once. Though that's not all that hard. I've done it myself a couple of times. The trick is knowing when it's okay and the wound has healed. Dad never gave us stitches because he wasn't trained on how to make the scar less noticeable. Veterinarian here. I've sutured myself and friends up several times. We were drunk in vet school and a buddy of mine sliced his shoulder open. We closed it up and kept drinking. Actual life-threatening injuries should be handled by our human medicine counterparts. Vet. Could I? Yes. But that sounds super dangerous. Zombie apocalypse? Yes. Everyone needs a vet on their zombie apocalypse team. From food safety to surgery, we can do it all. Not a vet, but had this conversation with a vet. Apparently a lot of the processes and medications are the same between large mammals. So while not advisable, it is feasible. Most vets wanting to keep their license also wouldn't be mob surgeons. Worked with a bunch of vets over the years and they're pros. If you came in with a dangerous or life-threatening wound, they'd likely feel morally bound to help. If nothing else than to patch you up until you can get to an emergency room. At risk to their own career. Should any lawsuits or whatnot pop up. My own mother had her hand stitched up by a vet because she was attacked by a dog in a pet store. That was adjoined to a veterinary practice, so they were the immediate source of help. I observed those folk and other veterinary professionals for years, and while I doubt they'd be cool with aiding a criminal element, they treat the life in front of them. Ex-convicts of Reddit. What is your most pleasant prison memory? When I was a teenager, my dad was in prison. We would visit when we could. I remember I took a foil wrapper from an old-school Hershey's bar and folded it into an origami rose. My dad took this rose and quietly called a very young guy who was visiting with his wife and gave him the rose to give to her. He explained that they got married just before he had to report for his sentence, and that guys don't have anything they can give their wives as a romantic gesture. The young wife seemed so excited with that little foil chocolate-scented rose. It was a sweet, romantic gesture on my dad's part that I had never really seen. I spent a little over a decade in prison. From the early 90s to the early 2000s. In the state where I did my time. All of us had to work a semblance of a job inside the compound. Kitchen. Inside grounds. Maintenance. Painting. Cleaning. Etc. Being in a program of any kind, including education, counted as having a job, and thus had waiting lists to get into. Programs also needed better educated inmates to work there as clerks and tutors. And these were the sorts of jobs that the smart inmates tended to gravitate towards. Involving more hours than a menial job, but cleaner and less distasteful. Often it meant we had access to older computer hardware. No internet or anything, though. PC video games occasionally made their way onto the compound. Usually brought in by one or another of the freeworlders, i.e. prison workers who were not guards, who had a soft spot for his clerks. My boss in the education classroom where I worked was like this. Though he had something of a policy that the only games he would bring in would be education, strategy, or puzzle-oriented, such that if he ever got asked about it, he could say that it was a critical thinking tool that was part of his teaching curriculum. The happiest day of my prison life was the day that he brought in Myst. I had read articles about it, and wanted to play it someday, but never imagined that I'd get to play it before I got out. It was an absolutely groundbreaking game for its time, with beautifully graphics, soothing music, imaginative puzzles, and an intriguing storyline. I had never seen anything like it. The articles, reviews didn't do it justice. Over the following weeks, I would lose myself in that world for maybe an hour a day. Living out an alternate life in a beautiful and magical world so far removed from the horrible reality of my current existence. I was disappointed when it was all finally over. Though in a way it led to my second happiest prison memory. Which was the day, a year later, when he brought in *Riven, the sequel to Myst*. About 15 years ago, when I was released from prison, I had nothing to my name. Only my $40 gate fee. A dear friend of mine on the inside made sure I had clothes, shoes and a job to go to. Harold, if you're out there. Love you, bro. There was one day in my unit the kitchen workers organized an event where they stole so much food out of the kitchen they fed the entire 250-ish man pod, and all the races ate nachos together. Edit. Holy shit. Rip my inbox. Let's see how long I stay. Top comment after posting this. YouTube. Phoenix the courtroom superhero. The 30-minute movie culminated with a White House petition to change the 13th Amendment and stop the U.S. government from enslaving its own people in the justice system, and a list of elected officials in Congress and Senate next to their campaign contributions from private prison corporations. I did this in October 2014 before Trump ever announced he was running. Both sides sold their own people into slavery and big tech censored me. I've been permabanned from our politics for 6.5 years now, since 5 Minute from publishing. I also own our prison strike, by the way. Edit 2. I'm also banned from Twitter now. There's a feeling of freedom even being locked up. Freedom from responsibilities. No rent. Free food. Routine. I needed that at one point in my life. I wouldn't want to go back to that. But at the time it was probably the better of a few scenarios. I think people would be surprised at how much nice things happen in prison. It is crazy the amount of altruism you see in prison. People who beg for food or items will often be given them. Even though the people know they are a beggar. They will help them. But if you are an asshole and a beggar, you will get cut off. I had family. And I could have asked them to send me money. But I don't like asking them for that. And I don't like donating to the prison system from buying their food. People would still constantly give me food and items. Things that they could sell or trade. And they would just give them to me. I just went through reception and orientation at a new prison. And had no money on my books. A guy, who I never talked to before, saw that I kept going out to the yard and work out in my prison-issue scrubs. After 2 weeks, he comes up to me and say, "Hey, are you just from reception?" Quote. I say, "Yeah, just moved here." He says, "So, I see you don't have anything other than the state clothing. I have some extras that should fit you. I'll bring it to your cell." He brought me 4 pairs of gym shorts, 3 shirts, and an $60 pair of Nike running shoes with a small tear that was stitched up. This guy, who I didn't even know, gave me about $100 worth of stuff. People get murdered for $10 in prison. This wasn't a small gift. I wanted to give him something in return. But he wouldn't accept it. The people who are in prison have done something bad to go there. But prison becomes a community. Just like any neighborhood. You get to know your cellies. You get to know your neighbors. And there is this sense of, I know how shitty this place is. And I want to help you out. Because I know what you feel. I think most people would be surprised at the amount of altruism that goes on in prison. People are sad when you don't get a call from your wife. Or you get rejected from early parole. These people empathize with you. And want to see you go. Even though they have to stay there. And will miss your company. You can see friendship and love and empathy even within the walls of a prison.
Subscribe, my brothers.